At Vale Marks, we believe that every story carries a lesson, and some bonds are so deep they defy time, fear, and even silence. Today's journey is not just about survival. It is about loyalty, courage, and the silent promises that protect families across generations. As the philosopher Lao Tzu once said, being deeply loved by someone gives you strength, while loving someone deeply gives you courage. Stay with us until the very end, because this is more than just a tale. It is a powerful reminder that even in darkness, love leads the way. Like, comment, and subscribe to Vale Marks so we can continue sharing meaningful, heartfelt stories that truly matter. It began on a night when even the moon seemed to hide. Rain hammered the streets of Cedar Falls in relentless sheets, the kind of downpour that made most people stay indoors and forget the world outside. The temperature had dropped sharply after dusk, leaving the sidewalks slick with cold and shadow. At St. Clair's Regional Medical Center, the overnight staff was settling into what they expected would be another long, uneventful shift. Nurses shuffled charts, machines beeped in quiet rhythm, the scent of antiseptic lingered in the air. No one could have predicted what would come through the doors that night. At exactly 11:15, the hospital's automatic doors hissed open. No ambulance lights. No paramedics rushing in. Instead, it was someone, entirely unexpected. A large black pit bull limped inside, his coat soaked and glistening with rain. A long pale scar ran across his left shoulder, a mark of some past battle. His name, though no one yet knew it, was Shadow. Behind him trailed 3 tiny puppies, each no bigger than a pair of bundled socks. They stumbled forward on trembling legs, their bellies soaked, their eyes wide with confusion and trust. For a moment, the entire ER lobby froze. A nurse dropped her clipboard. A patient waiting in a wheelchair gasped. Even the steady beep of the EKG monitors seemed to pause in the silence that followed. Emily Carter, head nurse, stood near the triage desk. She had seen strange things in her 15 years at St. Clair's. Car crash victims, near drownings, even a runaway goat once during a county fair mishap. But never this. Never a pit bull leading 3 puppies into a hospital like he knew exactly where he was going. And he did know. Shadow's eyes scanned the room, not with fear, but with determination. There was intelligence in his gaze, something deeper than mere instinct. His body trembled slightly from exhaustion and cold, but he stood tall, his scarred frame forming a protective barrier between the puppies and the wide, unpredictable world. The smallest puppy carried something in its mouth. A faded, frayed baby collar, once pink, now dulled to almost gray. The lettering was worn away, but Emily's trained eyes immediately recognized it as a child's accessory, likely cherished and long kept. Her heart tightened. Before her mind could fully process the situation, her feet moved. She approached slowly, her hands open, voice gentle. "Hey there, buddy. You're safe now. No one's going to hurt you." Shadow didn't growl or back away. He simply watched her, those deep amber eyes steady and filled with something Emily could only describe as pleading. Not for himself, for the little lives at his feet. As Emily knelt, she noticed a strange detail. Around Shadow's front leg, partially hidden beneath matted fur and mud, was a plastic band. A hospital ID tag, the kind used for patients. It was old, discolored from time and weather. Her breath caught in her throat. "What in the world?" She gently lifted the band to examine it. Most of the text had faded, but a barcode remained intact. Her fingers trembled as she called out over her shoulder, "Someone get a scanner. Now." A tech rushed over with a tablet. The scanner beeped, Everyone waited, the air in the room thick with expectation and something else. Dread. The name that appeared on the screen made the tech's face go pale. Madeline Brooks. Emily felt the floor sway beneath her for just a moment. The name rippled through her memory like a stone thrown into still water. Madeline Brooks, 28. Pregnant. She had visited St. Clair's exactly 3 years ago for a routine prenatal checkup. She had never been seen again. The case had haunted the hospital staff and the local community for months. Flyers with her photo had once been taped to street poles, coffee shop bulletin boards, and the very walls of this hospital. Her mother, Carol Brooks, had pleaded for answers, but there had been none, until now. The pit bull's soft whine broke Emily's trance. Shadow leaned forward, nudging her hand with his nose. His eyes were not those of a stray or an abandoned animal. They were the eyes of a guardian. Emily stood up, her heart pounding. She addressed the gathered staff firmly. "We're not turning them away. Bring them all to the break room. Get towels. Warm water. Call Dr. Turner." As the staff hurried into action, Shadow seemed to sigh with relief. He nudged the puppies forward, guiding them as though he had rehearsed this moment in his mind 1,000 times. The puppies followed, unsteady but determined, their trust in Shadow absolute. In that instant, Emily understood. Shadow hadn't wandered into the hospital by chance. He had led the puppies here on purpose, not just seeking shelter, seeking help, and maybe something more. Answers. Outside, the rain intensified, lashing against the windows like the world itself was trying to drown out what was happening inside. But it was too late. The first thread of a long-forgotten mystery had just been pulled loose, and Emily had no intention of letting it unravel without finding the truth. Shadow's journey wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning. Emily Carter stood alone in the dimly lit records room, the rain still tapping steadily against the windows. The puppies were safe now, curled up in warm towels in the break room. Shadow rested nearby, his eyes never straying from the door, as if he knew the search for answers had only just begun. Emily's fingers hovered over the hospital's old patient database. The name Madeline Brooks still echoed in her mind. She typed it into the search bar, breath held. The screen blinked, then loaded. Patient, Madeline Brooks. Age, 28. Last visit, prenatal checkup. Date, 3 years ago this month. Emily's pulse quickened. 3 years. Madeline had come in for a routine examination. Nothing unusual, no complications. She had been healthy, hopeful, and excited. Then she was gone, vanished without a trace. The police investigation had gone cold. The hospital's internal search had reached a dead end. Eventually, the town moved on. At least, most people did. Emily leaned back in her chair, heart heavy. She remembered the missing person posters that once covered every lamppost and grocery store door in Cedar Falls. Madeline's soft smile, her hopeful eyes, and the quiet ache in her mother's voice during every news interview. As if summoned by that memory, the door creaked open. An older woman stepped inside, her face drawn but alert. Her silver-streaked hair was pulled back neatly, but her eyes were swollen from years of tears that still came too easily. Carol Brooks. "I heard," Carol said softly, voice shaking. "They called me. Someone said my daughter's name came up in the system." Emily rose immediately. "Mrs. Brooks, Carol, yes." "Please, come sit down." Carol waved the offer away. "No, tell me. Is it true? Is there some sign?" Emily hesitated only a moment before nodding. "A pit bull came in tonight. 3 puppies with him. He was wearing Madeline's old patient ID band." For a breath, Carol didn't move. She just closed her eyes. When she opened them, a single tear slipped down her cheek. Shadow. Emily blinked. You know him? Carol nodded slowly. Of course, he's family. And then, as if a dam had broken, the past poured out. 3 years earlier, when Carol was battling late-stage breast cancer, she had fallen into a deep depression. Treatments exhausted her. She withdrew from friends and family, at times even from Madeline. Madeline, desperate to help, had researched therapy animals. That's when Shadow entered their lives. A rescue pit bull with scars of his own. A trainer had matched him with Carol, believing his gentle temperament and strong protective instincts made him perfect for emotional support. He saved me, Carol whispered, eyes distant. When I didn't have the strength to fight anymore, Shadow did. He'd lay beside me during chemo. He'd nudge me out of bed when I wanted to give up. He was more than a dog. He was hope. Emily swallowed hard, sensing that hope had been stretched thin but never broken. When my cancer went into remission, Carol continued, I was ready to return the favor. But Shadow wouldn't leave Madeline's side. She was pregnant then. And Shadow, well, he chose his next person to protect. Carol's voice wavered. Madeline and I made him a promise. If anything ever happened, Shadow would keep the baby safe. I never imagined... Her breath hitched. I never imagined I'd have to rely on that promise. Emily listened silently, her own chest tightening. I begged the police to keep looking, Carol went on. But as weeks turned into months and months into years, they stopped calling me back. Even family members tried to make me accept that Madeline had either run away or worse. Emily thought of all the times she had seen families forced to let go, to move on. But some never could. And Carol, she had refused to surrender to the silence. I kept her room exactly the same, Carol whispered. The crib she bought, the little clothes she sewed for the baby. I washed them every few months, just to keep the scent of home alive. Her gaze sharpened, fierce through the tears. A mother always knows. I never believed she was gone. Not really. Emily nodded. That belief, it brought Shadow back to us tonight. Carol's hand trembled as she reached into her purse and pulled out a small, worn photograph. It showed a younger Madeline sitting cross-legged in a sunny park, her hand resting on her rounded belly. Beside her sat Shadow, upright and watchful. His scar, even then, marked him as a survivor. Emily took the photo gently. The image wasn't just a memory. It was a reminder that love, even in the face of time and tragedy, left a trail to follow. Shadow's not just trying to survive, Emily said softly. He's trying to finish what Madeline started. Carol closed her eyes again. Then let's not waste another moment. Outside, the storm raged on. But inside the records room, a different storm was gathering. One forged from years of unanswered questions, unwavering hope, and the bond between a mother, a daughter, and a dog who had never broken his promise. As Emily gathered the file, Shadow's soft paws padded into the room. His eyes locked with Carol's. No growl, no bark. Just recognition. And in that silent exchange, Carol's breath caught. You've come home, she whispered. And in Shadow's calm, steady gaze, she found her answer. Shadow did not rest for long. After the initial shock of his arrival, after the warmth of towels and the comfort of food shared between the puppies, the pit bull's instincts stirred once more. His deep amber eyes never stopped watching the door to the ER waiting room. Even as Emily and Carol spoke softly nearby, even as the puppies snuggled close, Shadow remained restless. It began subtly. A quiet pacing, the soft scrape of claws on tile. Then he paused by the automatic doors, his broad head turning back toward Emily. His gaze was not random. It was purposeful, intent. Emily noticed it almost immediately. "He wants something," she murmured. "He's trying to tell us." Carol, still seated, followed Shadow's eyes. "He's leading." Before anyone could object, Shadow moved again, his body angled toward the doors. He looked back at Emily, waiting. Without hesitation, Emily grabbed her coat. "Get Dr. Turner," she told a passing nurse. "Tell him to meet me outside." Moments later, Alex Turner appeared, flashlight already in hand. "You really think he's guiding us somewhere?" "I don't think," Emily replied, her voice steady. "I know." The night air was biting cold as they stepped outside. The rain had lessened, but the ground remained slick, and the sky above churned with low-hanging clouds. The hospital's rear parking lot stretched into a large, overgrown field lined with trees. Few ever ventured there anymore. But Shadow moved toward it without pause. The puppies let out small, anxious whines from the break room window, as if sensing the importance of what was unfolding. "Stay here," Carol called after them softly. "Mommy will be back." Shadow crossed the wet pavement and disappeared into the tall grass. Emily and Alex followed, the beams from their flashlights slicing through the darkness. The field gave way to a narrow trail, barely visible beneath fallen leaves and debris. Trees closed in overhead, skeletal branches weaving a canopy that shut out what little moonlight remained. Shadow's movements were sure, his paws finding solid ground where theirs slipped and faltered. "He's not just wandering," Alex whispered. "He knows exactly where he's going." Emily nodded, breath misting in the cold. "He's retracing steps." They moved deeper into the woods. The storm's aftermath left the path treacherous, but Shadow pressed on, occasionally glancing back to ensure they followed. His scarred frame moved like a shadow itself, silent and determined. Nearly 20 minutes into their trek, the trees thinned. The beam of Emily's flashlight struck something man-made, a structure. It was a cabin, or what had once been one. The roof had partially collapsed. The wooden porch sagged dangerously. Windows were boarded up with mismatched scraps of wood and plastic sheeting. Vines choked the exterior, nature reclaiming what had been abandoned. Shadow stopped at the edge of the clearing. He sat down, head high, eyes locked on the cabin. "This must be it," Emily breathed. Alex tested the porch carefully before helping Emily across. Shadow waited until they were safely up the steps before following. The door was ajar. A gust of damp, cold air escaped as Emily pushed it open fully. Inside, the air was stale, tinged with mold and earth. The floorboards creaked underfoot. The faint scent of old firewood lingered, mixed with something bittersweet. The unmistakable trace of human presence that had long since faded. Their flashlight beams swept the room. A rusted stove. A toppled chair. Blankets piled in a corner, ragged and discolored. Evidence that someone had once lived here, or had hidden here. Then Emily saw it. A wall near the corner where a strip of wallpaper had peeled away. Taped there was a photograph. Time had yellowed it. The edges curled, but the image remained clear enough to steal Emily's breath. It showed a young woman sitting cross-legged on a blanket. Her face was unmistakable, Madeline Brooks. Her eyes were soft, but tired, as if the weight of the world had already begun pressing down. In her arms, she held a tiny baby wrapped in a blue blanket. and beside her, proud and watchful, sat a younger shadow. His fur unscarred then, his gaze already that of a protector. Alex gently removed the photo from the wall, turning it toward Emily. She was here. Shadow let out a low, confirming whine. His eyes never left the photo. Beside the makeshift bed in the corner, something else caught Emily's attention. A worn, spiral-bound notebook. The cover was stained, the edges water-damaged. She picked it up carefully and flipped it open. Madeline's handwriting filled the pages. Fast, sometimes shaky, but legible. I can't trust the police anymore. Someone is watching. I see the same truck near the trails every time I go out. Shadow keeps me safe, but I don't know how long we can hide. If anything happens to me, he will protect the baby. Emily turned the pages. Madeline's fear grew more evident with each entry. They came to the cabin today, pretended to be rangers. I didn't answer the door. Shadow growled before they even knocked. He knows. If I disappear again, it's not by choice. Emily's hand trembled. She looked up at Alex, whose face had paled under the harsh beam of his flashlight. She was running from someone, he said quietly. Someone who didn't want her to be found. Emily nodded, tears threatening the edges of her vision. More pages revealed a timeline, Madeline's pregnancy, the birth of her child, and the day she discovered she wasn't just hiding for herself anymore. She had named the baby Matthew, after her late father. But something else was evident. The entries became more scattered, more frantic, as if Madeline had begun moving frequently, never staying in one place too long. Then, near the end of the journal, a final note. If this notebook is found, Shadow will lead you to the truth. Trust him. He remembers every safe place, every trail. He is more than a dog. He is our guardian. Emily closed the journal and looked at Shadow. You've been carrying this burden for 3 years, she whispered. You never gave up. Shadow's ears perked, as if understanding. Alex scanned the small cabin once more. She was clever. She trained him for this. Emily nodded. He's not just a witness. He's her voice. Outside, the wind had picked up again, rustling the leaves in a mournful chorus. But within the cabin's walls, a different sound prevailed. The steady, hopeful breathing of a pit bull who had never abandoned his mission. Shadow stepped forward, nudging the journal with his nose before turning back toward the door. He was ready for them to take the next step, and so were they. The weight of the journal pressed heavy in Emily's bag, as she and Alex stepped back out into the cold night air. Behind them, the abandoned cabin stood silent, its walls whispering of fear, survival, and an unbreakable bond between a mother, her child, and a loyal pit bull. Shadow stayed close to Emily's side, his movements tense but measured, his ears perked, scanning the darkness ahead. We should get back, Alex whispered. There's nothing more for us here tonight. Emily nodded, though something deep inside her, the same instinct that had urged her to follow Shadow into these woods, told her the night wasn't done revealing its secrets. The rain had lightened, leaving a fine mist that curled around the trees. As they began retracing their steps toward the hospital, Shadow suddenly froze. His muscles stiffened, and a low, guttural growl rolled from his throat. Emily lifted her flashlight quickly, sweeping the beam through the dense underbrush. A figure stepped into the trail. At first glance, he appeared to be a park ranger. The uniform was right. Dark green jacket, heavy boots caked with mud, a badge clipped to his chest. But something felt off. The man stood too still, too calculated, as if he had been waiting for them. "Evening," he said, voice smooth but forced. "You folks lost?" Emily kept the flashlight aimed at his chest, unwilling to lower it. "We're just heading back to the hospital." The man's gaze flickered from Emily to Alex, then down to Shadow, who stood between them, teeth bared in a silent warning. The puppy's father, the protector, ready to defend again if needed. The stranger smiled slightly. Strange place to be poking around this late. Dangerous out here after a storm. Emily didn't reply. Her instincts screamed at her to stay cautious. Then as her light moved down the man's arm, something caught her eye. A tattoo. It peeked out from under the cuff of his sleeve. Subtle, but unmistakable. A snake curled into a circle, devouring its own tail. Emily's breath caught. The symbol was seared into her memory from Madeline's journal. She had described it in fearful detail. A mark worn by those who hunted her, those who demanded silence. The Ouroboros, but with a jagged line slicing through it. A message of control of cycles that could not be broken. "Who are you?" Alex asked sharply, stepping closer to Emily. The man didn't answer immediately. His smile faded. "You shouldn't be digging into things that don't concern you." Emily's fingers tightened around the flashlight. "Madeline Brooks concerns me. And her children, her mother, her life." The stranger's eyes hardened. "She made her choice. You should make yours. Walk away." Shadow growled again, louder this time, his entire body rigid. He sensed the threat even clearer than they did. Emily felt the fear rise in her throat but forced it down. She could not, would not, back away now. Alex lowered his voice to Emily. "We can't confront him here. Not without backup." Emily nodded slightly. "We need to move." She took a small step backward, and Shadow mirrored her movement. But as they shifted, the man also stepped forward. "Don't," he warned. "You'll only make it worse." At that moment, Shadow lunged, not to attack, but to distract. He barked ferociously, the sound echoing through the trees, birds scattered into the misty night air. Emily didn't hesitate. "Run!" She grabbed Alex's arm, and together they bolted down the trail. Shadow stayed at their side, his powerful legs propelling him forward effortlessly, despite the scar that marred his shoulder. Behind them, the man shouted, but they didn't stop to listen. The woods blurred past in streaks of gray and black. Emily's breath came hard and fast, her mind racing as quickly as her feet. Who was that man? Why was he watching the cabin? And how had he known to intercept them? The flashlight bobbed wildly with each step. Shadow led now, no longer following but guiding them through the maze of trees and tangled brush. He moved like he had memorized every path, every hidden trail that Madeline had once used. The terrain was slick with mud, roots reaching up like grasping fingers. Emily stumbled, but Alex caught her before she fell. Shadow paused only long enough to make sure they were still with him. They reached the edge of the hospital's outer grounds faster than Emily thought possible. The sight of the parking lot lights piercing the mist felt like a lifeline. As they crossed the final stretch, tires screeched somewhere back in the woods. A vehicle sped away into the night. "He's gone," Alex gasped, turning to scan the shadows behind them. "For now." Emily didn't reply. Her heart hammered not from the run, but from the weight of what they had just learned. Madeline had been right to fear. The danger hadn't ended when she disappeared. It was still out there, watching, waiting. Shadow leaned against Emily's leg, panting but alert. His job wasn't done. "Not yet. We need to tell Carol," Emily said, her voice firm despite the tremble in her limbs. "And we need to get help." "Real help." Alex nodded, wiping sweat from his brow. No more secrets. No more silence. As they stepped back into the hospital's warm, sterile light, Emily glanced down at Shadow. His eyes met hers, steady and unwavering. "You've kept her safe this long," she whispered. "Now it's our turn." The night had revealed more than just shadows. It had exposed the reality that someone, perhaps more than one person, was willing to do anything to keep Madeline's story buried. But the truth had already begun to surface, and with Shadow leading the way, they would not stop until it was fully brought to light. For the first time in 3 years, Emily felt something stronger than fear: determination. And Shadow, silent and steadfast, was ready for the next chapter. The hospital lab was quiet except for the low hum of machinery and the occasional tapping of keys. Emily stood near the counter, arms folded tightly across her chest, eyes locked on the technician as he carefully handled the samples. Shadow sat at her feet, his head resting on his front paws, but his eyes watchful, following every movement. The 3 puppies, now clean, fed, and nestled in a large, padded kennel nearby, slept soundly. Their soft breathing filled the silent room with a fragile sense of peace. Alex stood beside Emily. "You're sure about this?" he asked quietly. Emily nodded. "We have to know. It's not just about Madeline anymore. It's about her children, her legacy." She had requested a DNA comparison between the puppies, Shadow, and Carol Brooks. If there was any family left in this tangled mystery, the results would reveal it. Carol arrived moments later, her face pale but determined. She carried the same photograph Emily had seen in the cabin, the young, smiling Madeline with Shadow and a tiny baby swaddled in blue. The image had become both a comfort and a torment. Proof of love, but also a constant reminder of all that had been lost. "Is it time?" Carol asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Emily nodded. "Almost." The technician worked methodically, running the DNA markers through the system. It was a process Carol didn't fully understand, but her hope didn't waver. She sat down beside the kennel, reaching through the bars to stroke one of the puppies gently. "They look just like her," she whispered. Madeline had the same little spot above her nose when she was a baby. Shadow lifted his head, ears twitching at Carol's voice. He moved closer, pressing his large body against the kennel as if offering his silent support. "He knows," Carol murmured. "He's always known." The computer beeped softly. The technician glanced at the screen, then turned to Emily and Alex. "I've got the results." Emily's breath caught. Carol reached for the edge of the counter to steady herself. The technician spoke carefully, understanding the weight of what he was about to reveal. "The puppies all share maternal DNA markers, consistent with Madeline Brooks' profile on file from her prenatal visits. They also have strong genetic ties to Carol Brooks." He paused. "They're her grandchildren." Carol gasped, covering her mouth with one trembling hand. Tears filled her eyes, but this time they weren't just from grief. They were from a tidal wave of relief, of validation. Emily moved to her side, kneeling down. "You were right, all along." Carol let out a choked laugh between sobs. "I told them, I told the police, I told the doctors. I told anyone who would listen. A mother always knows." Shadow pressed his head gently into Carol's lap. She ran her fingers through his short, dark fur, her tears falling freely now. "You brought them home," she whispered. "Just like you promised her." Emily felt her own throat tighten. In all her years as a nurse, she had seen many kinds of courage. But this unwavering faith between a mother, a daughter, and a dog, was something entirely different. It was unbreakable. Alex cleared his throat, his voice soft. "That's not all." He handed Emily the final pages of Madeline's journal, which they had retrieved from the cabin, but hadn't fully examined in the rush to return. Emily unfolded the worn paper carefully. Madeline's handwriting had grown shaky toward the end. Fear, exhaustion, and constant movement had clearly taken their toll. But the words were legible. If I disappear, if I can't protect them myself, go to Stone Hollow. It's the only safe place left. Shadow knows the way. He always knows the way. Emily looked up at Carol. Does that name mean anything to you? Carol wiped at her cheeks, thinking, Stone Hollow. Yes, it's where Madeline and I used to camp when she was little. We went every summer. There's a small clearing just off the old trails. She said it made her feel safe. Shadow's ears perked at the name, and he let out a low, eager whine. He remembers, Carol whispered, even after all this time. Emily stood, folding the journal pages carefully and placing them back into her bag. She left us a trail. She wanted to be found. She trusted him to guide us, Alex added, nodding toward Shadow. Carol looked down at the pit bull, her tears falling onto his fur. And he never gave up. Emily could feel the weight of the moment settling into the room like gravity. The DNA results confirmed more than biology. They confirmed hope. They confirmed that even in the darkest circumstances, Madeline had held onto faith in Shadow, in her children's survival, and in her mother's love. This changes everything, Emily said. We need to get to Stone Hollow. Carol nodded. I'll come, please. Alex checked his watch. It'll be dawn soon. We can leave at first light. Shadow rose to his feet, as if he had been waiting for those words. His body, though older and scarred, moved with renewed purpose. He glanced at the puppies, then toward the door, his tail giving a single, strong wag. We'll find her, Emily promised. Whatever it takes. Carol bent down, pressing a kiss to the top of Shadow's head. Take me to my daughter. Outside, the night sky was beginning to lighten. A faint, silver glow touched the horizon, a promise that no matter how long the darkness had lasted, morning would always return. The bond between mother and daughter had endured time, distance, and fear. And now, with Shadow leading the way, it was ready to endure one final journey. The morning sun had barely lifted above the horizon when Emily, Alex, Carol, and Shadow reached the outskirts of Stone Hollow. Mist curled low over the forest floor, wrapping the trees in a soft, silvery veil. The trail ahead was old and narrow, hidden beneath fallen leaves and brambles, but Shadow moved with certainty. His steps were slow but unwavering, nose close to the ground, ears tuned to every sound. He knew the way. Carol clutched the photograph of Madeline tightly in her hand, the edges worn soft from years of hope and fear. Emily walked at her side, flashlight ready despite the growing daylight. Alex followed closely, a radio clipped to his belt, already in contact with the sheriff's department just in case. They had prepared for the worst, but carried the weight of hope like armor. As they moved deeper into the forest, the air grew colder. Birds stirred in the branches overhead, their calls sharp in the quiet morning. Shadow paused occasionally, sniffing the air, then continued, guiding them along a path only he seemed able to see. After nearly an hour of climbing and weaving through undergrowth, they reached a rocky incline. Shadow stopped, tail stiff, head turned toward a narrow gap between two boulders. A hidden passage. This must be it, Alex said softly. Shadow glanced back at Emily, then moved forward, squeezing his muscular frame through the tight opening. Emily and Alex followed, Carol close behind. The passage opened into a small clearing, surrounded by high rock walls and sheltered by the canopy above. In the center, huddled beneath a blanket of moss and leaves, was a figure. Madeline. Her hair was longer, streaked with gray and dirt. Her face, though gaunt, still held the shape Emily remembered from the photograph. She cradled something close to her chest, a small, faded baby collar. The same one Shadow's puppy had carried to the hospital. Madeline stirred as Shadow approached, his soft whine echoing in the stillness. Her eyes fluttered open, glazed with exhaustion, but sharp with recognition. "Shadow," she whispered, voice raspy. "You found them." Emily rushed forward, kneeling beside her. "Madeline." "It's okay. You're safe now." Madeline's eyes moved slowly from Emily to Carol. For a moment, she seemed unsure if what she saw was real. "Mom?" Her voice cracked. Carol sank to her knees, tears already spilling down her cheeks. "I'm here, baby." "I never stopped waiting. Never." Madeline's frail arms tightened around the collar. "I knew Shadow would bring you." Emily reached for her hand. "Your puppies are safe. They're waiting for you." Madeline's breath hitched, relief and disbelief colliding in her chest. But before she could speak again, a sharp crack echoed from the trees behind them. A figure stepped into the clearing, the man from the woods, the same ranger uniform. The same calculated stillness, and the same tattoo, partially hidden beneath his sleeve, the serpent devouring its tail, marred by a jagged line. His eyes darkened when he saw Madeline alive, Shadow standing protectively over her. "I warned you to stay out of this," he growled. Emily stood, positioning herself between him and Madeline. "It's over. The police are on their way." The man's hand moved toward his belt, reaching for something Emily couldn't see. But Shadow reacted first. With a low, ferocious growl, the pit bull lunged, body colliding with the man's legs. The stranger stumbled, crashing to the ground as Shadow stood over him, teeth bared, unflinching. Alex raised his radio. "Now! We need backup at the clearing." Within minutes, the sound of footsteps broke through the tension. 2 uniformed officers emerged from the trees, weapons drawn. "Step away from them," one ordered. The man froze. Shadow remained poised, ready to strike if needed. One of the officers lowered his weapon slightly as he moved forward. His face was familiar. "Carol," he called, voice tinged with disbelief. "It's Deputy Harris." Carol gasped softly. "You were our neighbor." Deputy Harris nodded. "I didn't believe you back then. None of us did." "I'm sorry." He cuffed the man swiftly, reading him his rights. "But we're making it right now." As the officers led the intruder away, Shadow finally relaxed, his body sagging slightly with exhaustion. He returned to Madeline's side, nuzzling her gently. Madeline smiled weakly. "Good boy. You kept them safe." "Just like I knew you would." Emily wrapped a blanket around Madeline's shoulders. "Let's get you home." As they prepared to leave the clearing, the weight of the past seemed to lift, replaced by something new. A beginning. Carol, Madeline, the puppies, and Shadow. 3 generations reunited. A family bound not just by blood, but by resilience, loyalty, and love. Shadow had not just led them through the forest. He had led them through fear, through doubt, and into healing. And now, the journey home could finally begin. The days that followed felt like the world itself had taken a deep breath and finally exhaled. Madeline was admitted to St. Clair's under careful watch. She was dehydrated, malnourished, and suffering from an untreated infection, but the doctors were amazed at her resilience. Years of surviving in the shadows had left scars on her body, but not on her spirit. Every day, her strength returned a little more. The 3 puppies, now officially identified as Matthew, Hope, and Willow, never left her side when allowed. Shadow, though exhausted and nursing minor injuries of his own, remained watchful. He rested only when assured that Madeline and the puppies were safe. Every time a nurse or doctor entered the room, Shadow would lift his head and give a low, approving rumble, as if granting permission. Carol spent every moment at her daughter's bedside. She held Madeline's hand through IV changes and whispered lullabies to the puppies, songs she had once sung to Madeline as a child. "I told you," Carol often said, smiling through tears. A mother always knows. 1 week later, as the sun streamed gently through the hospital windows, Madeline finally stood on her own. She looked stronger, not just in body, but in the fire that had returned to her eyes. "I need to do something," she said softly, looking at Emily and Alex, who had become her closest confidants in the chaos. "I can't let what happened to me happen to anyone else." Emily nodded. "What do you have in mind?" Madeline took a deep breath. "A foundation for women like me, for children born into fear, and for dogs like Shadow, those who protect and heal, even when the world turns away." She smiled down at Shadow, who sat beside her chair, tail thumping softly. "I want to call it Shadow's Promise." Word spread quickly. The story of Shadow's loyalty, of a mother's love, and of a family's triumph over fear captured the heart of the entire town, and soon, the entire state. Donations poured in. Survivors of domestic violence shared their stories. Veterinarians and animal shelters pledged to partner with the foundation, offering care and training for rescue dogs. Deputy Harris, the once skeptical neighbor who had led the arrest at Stone Hollow, volunteered his time to speak at local schools, teaching children about courage and empathy. The hospital staff, inspired by the reunion they had witnessed, organized a benefit walk. Steps for Shadow. Hundreds attended. Madeline stood before the crowd at the inaugural event, holding one of her puppies in her arms. Shadow stood proudly at her side, his eyes alert, his scar now a symbol not of past wounds, but of battles overcome. "This isn't just my story," Madeline told the crowd. "It's about every woman who has been silenced, every child who's felt forgotten, every animal who has been abandoned. But most of all, it's about hope, and about the silent promises made by those who cannot speak but never stop protecting." The applause was thunderous, but there was one final promise to fulfill. Several weeks later, Madeline, Carol, Emily, Alex, Shadow, and the puppies returned to Stone Hollow. The forest, once a place of fear and hiding, now stood peaceful beneath a clear blue sky. Birds sang from the trees, and a soft breeze rustled the leaves. They gathered in the clearing where Madeline had once hidden, now transformed by the light of healing. A small memorial had been placed beneath the largest tree, a simple plaque that read, "For those who never gave up, for those who found their way home." Madeline knelt beside Shadow, running her hand gently over his head. The puppies circled him playfully, their tails wagging as if they too understood this was more than just a gathering. It was a moment of closure and of beginning. Carol approached, placing a hand on her daughter's shoulder. "You were never alone," she whispered. "Not really?" Madeline smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. "I know." Emily watched from a few feet away, her own emotions rising. She thought back to that rainy night when a scarred pit bull had walked through the hospital doors, carrying more than just 3 puppies. He had carried the weight of a family's hope, the memories of a daughter, the silent prayers of a mother, and a promise that no matter how far or how dark the journey became, he would never stop leading them home. Alex leaned close to Emily. "You were right to follow him." Emily nodded, her gaze fixed on Shadow. "There are some promises that don't need to be spoken. They just need to be kept." Shadow lifted his head slightly as if he had heard her. His deep amber eyes were calm, steady. The same eyes that had watched over Madeline in the darkness, that had met Emily's gaze under the hospital's harsh lights, and that now reflected the warmth of family reunited. He had kept his promise, not just to Madeline, not just to the puppies, but to Carol, to Emily, to everyone who had ever doubted that loyalty and love could survive even the deepest shadows. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting golden light across the clearing, Carol gathered the puppies into her arms. Madeline took Shadow's leash gently, though she knew he would follow even without it. Together the family began the walk back down the trail, not away from the past, but toward a new chapter. A chapter built not on fear or loss, but on healing, on courage, and on a promise fulfilled. Shadow's promise. As the sun set over Stone Hollow, a family was not just reunited. They were healed by the loyalty of a dog who never broke his silent promise. Shadow's journey reminds us all. Some heroes do not speak, they act. Some promises are not made with words, but with actions that echo across time. In the words of Helen Keller, "Alone we can do so little. Together we can do so much." If this story moved your heart, please leave a comment below, subscribe to Vale Marks, and become part of a growing community that believes in second chances and unbreakable bonds. Your support helps us create deeper, richer, and more meaningful stories. Let us keep this light shining together.